What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to Week 11 predictions. I'm only going to have two prediction videos out this week. They're going to be both top 25 matchups in the SEC, and I'm so sorry I did not get these up sooner. I really wanted to. There were a lot of things that were happening in my life this week, and I just needed to take a little bit of some time off and a break, but I'm back. For all of you fine people now, thank you so much for staying patient, and thank you for watching this video because we have to talk about what essentially could be a college football playoff elimination game in ways from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the LSU Tigers and the Alabama Crimson Tide. This is why you come to these schools, man, to play in rivalry games like this, and everything is going to be on the line here in Death Valley. And we'll tell you everything you need to know about the Tide and Tigers here in just a little bit. Before we do that, you guys know I got to say thank you for all the love and support the channel has received and continues to receive, even though I was gone without really any mention. I appreciate you guys staying patient, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when I upload, especially if you want to help support this channel to its fullest. And you can also like, comment, and share. Anything you do would be appreciative. But I also would like to say, if you want to go follow me elsewhere and go support what else I do in the sports media realm, go give me a follow on Twitter or X. It's at TailgateNate29. And again, starting to get a lot better of an idea on how I want to post about things over there on that platform. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to go ahead now and dive on into this one. Again, couldn't talk about college football, or I shouldn't say couldn't. I didn't talk about college football earlier. So we're talking about college football now, and it is the biggest matchup from Week 11, and this one really has taken me a lot of time to figure out who I think is going to win this one. Again, it's the Tide, it's the Tigers, both with 2 losses, and both of them looking to keep their primary college football playoff hopes alive. How do we do preview predictions here on the channel? We're going to go through some keys to the game when both teams possess the football. So we will first look at keys to the game when the Tide are on offense against the LSU defense, and then we'll take a look at the LSU offense against this Crimson Tide defense. At the end of the video, I'll give you sort of my final thoughts, how I think this game is going to play out, as well as at the end give you a final prediction for who comes away with the win in Baton Rouge. A lot of people feel like this is the game to keep college football playoff hopes alive, and in ways, I feel like, yeah, especially with the way the country is shaping out right now. You go ahead and you take a look at the way the college football playoff bracket is shaping out and the way the country is looking to shape out. There probably are only going to be 1, 2, maybe 3 2-loss teams in the college football playoff. 3 losses, and you're on the well outside looking in. But both of these programs got a lot of football left, and this is going to feel like a must-win game for both sides. Let's now dive on in, and let us talk about this Alabama Crimson Tide offense. This is an offense that has kind of been up and down. Now, it's been really good for most of this season. Although in that game against South Carolina, it was a little bit lackluster. In the game against Tennessee, it was a little bit lackluster. And it took a little bit to come on before, it took a little bit to get going in that 34-0 win against Missouri just a couple of weeks ago. But again, this is not the biggest issue for Alabama on this team. There definitely are a lot bigger issues, which we'll talk about later when we move on over to the next slide. But you still got Jalen Milroe at quarterback. His playmaking ability is second to none throughout the country. He's got over 1,900 yards through the air on the season. 13 touchdowns, 6 picks, is the team's second leading rusher and leads the team with 12 rushing touchdowns. And I do think he is going to make plenty of plays here in this game. LSU is vulnerable within this secondary, and Alabama's got a lot of talented wide receivers, especially that man that you saw on the thumbnail screen just a little bit ago in Ryan Williams. The freshman has been simply outstanding, and he's been not only one of the best freshmen in college football, but one of the best wide receivers in college football, period. 702 yards, 7 touchdowns, and is averaging 20 yards per catch. That is absolutely insane. You also do have Jeremy Bernard in the tight end and CJ Dupree there as well. But again, Milroe can make plays not only with his arm, but with his legs, as I mentioned earlier. He's a threat every single play to get outside of the pocket and run, and he can be dynamic in doing both of them. And he has made plenty of plays for Alabama this year when they've needed him to. He's made a couple really big throws, made a couple really nice runs, and of course, it has led to pretty much nothing but success for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, the offensive line, a little bit of a concern. They have allowed 17 sacks this year, and you're going to be going up against an LSU defensive front that has been really good at being able to create pressure so far this year. More on that later. I still want to focus, though, on this Bama ground game and this Bama rushing attack. If you remember the past couple of times I've talked about Bama here on the channel, whether it was that game against the Missouri Tigers, whether it was the game against the Tennessee Volunteers, I've always said that Alabama has got to be able to find their rhythm in the ground game. If the ground game cannot get going, because it worked really well for the Crimson Tide earlier this season, and then it just been kind of slow and not really up to the standard that we had saw from Alabama earlier this season. You go ahead and you look at that game against the Missouri Tigers, 7.3 rush yards per carry, baby. It was all right there. Jalen Milroe didn't really have to do much through the air because the ground game controlled that entire, basically controlled that entire match against the Missouri Tigers just a couple of weeks ago. And it was everybody. I mean, Jam Miller had a couple rushing touchdowns, yards per carry, not as high as some of the other guys, but he was good. Justice Hangs averaged almost 10 yards per carry, had a touchdown. Jalen Milroe had 4.5 yards per carry with a touchdown on the ground there as well. And it seemed like everybody was ripping off chunk yardage plays. That's got to continue here in this game. Now, that's an issue because LSU is definitely very, very good at being able to slow down opponents' ground games and being able to get pressure back to the quarterback, which again, Alabama's offensive line, it's been a lot better this year, but it still is a little bit of a concern for this team. Again, they've allowed 17 sacks this year, while LSU has 28 total sacks on the season. You go ahead and you just take a look at what LSU has done throughout the year defensively and some of the notable playmakers. I mean, Braden Swinson has got to be the guy you mentioned first. He's got 8 sacks, but even the 2 leading tacklers here have some sack production as well. That is Weeks and Penn out of the linebacker room. They've both played really, really well so far this season. You also have a guy by the name of Savion Jones on that defensive front that has also been really, really good for the Tigers this season. And they're just one of the best teams in general at being able to get pressure to the opposing quarterback. But overall, the battle in the trenches is going to be very interesting to watch. Not only in Bama's pass protection, but also run blocking. Is the Bama offensive line going to be able to do enough to get this run game going? It was able to do it last week against the Missouri Tiger defensive front. That is okay. It's not as good as what Bama is going to see here with the LSU Tigers, but it is going to be an interesting battle to watch there nonetheless, and it is going to be a very tough task for Alabama to be able to consistently get this ground game going. But, I mean, you saw this LSU defense get gashed just a couple weeks ago against Texas A&M. The Aggies were able to rip off a couple of big runs, and they gashed the Tigers defense for 242 yards on the ground. Amari Daniels, Le'Veon Moss, they could not stop Marcel Reed at all, which plays into the hands of Bama because they got a dual threat quarterback in Jalen Milroe. That's a threat to do literally anything on every single play. The battle in the trenches is going to be interesting because Bama's got to get this run game going. LSU run defense is probably a little bit better than their secondary overall, but they have struggled over the previous couple of weeks. Let's go ahead and now dive on in to what happens when LSU has the football here. The offensive line has been huge for LSU so far this season. They got a couple of All-American tackles. They've got a couple really, really good offensive linemen that play there up on that front. This is not a team that's going to be a super huge threat to run the football, although it feels like I say it every week. It's not on screen for once, but Caden Durham has to be an X factor for the Tigers in this game there as well. You take a look at the game against Texas A&M. Caden Durham just really, from my knowledge, the stat sheet went away from me. There it goes. Yeah, he could not get a lot going at all. 11 carries for only 15 yards. And the LSU ground game was stuffed to just over 1 yard per carry. 24 yards on 23 carries. That's something that I think you're going to have to challenge this Bama defense with. You're going to have to be able to get Caden Durham in that run game. You're going to have to be able to get Josh Williams in that run game. And Garrett Nussmeier may have to make a play or two with his legs throughout this contest. But Nussmeier, I think, can absolutely challenge this Bama secondary. This Bama secondary has seen moments where it hasn't really been great. But overall, you can't really complain about what you have got out of the secondary so far. Garrett Nussmeier is going to be able to challenge these defensive backs, and he's got the wide receivers to do it. A guy you also saw on that thumbnail screen just a little bit ago, and Kyron Lacey has been really good so far. 618 yards and 6 touchdowns. You have Anderson that has 614 yards and 4 touchdowns. The tight end in Mason Taylor, and I could just go on and on. This is a team that throws it all over the yard. They don't just have 1, 2, maybe 3 weapons with the tight end Dupree like Alabama has. They have a number of guys that this Bama secondary and this Bama defense are going to have to game plan for. Wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, they all can catch the football, and they all are very dangerous weapons for Garrett Nussmeier. But again, the offensive line going to be a huge key. This is a Bama pass rush that can get home. It has not done it as consistently as LSU has done so far this season, but through 8 games, you got 18 sacks. That's a pretty respectable number. It means they're a threat to get back to this quarterback. They have to solve this LSU offensive line, though, that has been fantastic so far this season. Only 4 sacks allowed, and LSU is one of the best third down teams in the country, which is notable because Alabama has not been the greatest on third downs in recent games. And you go all the way back to that Vandy game, they really struggled against Vanderbilt on third down. They allowed Tennessee to get 6 of 14 on third down. It cleaned up a whole lot nicer, though, when they played the Missouri Tigers. The Tigers were only 3 of 13. Now, Brady Cook went down with injury. Missouri did not play their best game. They were not fully healthy. You can take all that into account, but the stats do not lie. This is an Alabama defense that, again, has a really good third down percentage, mostly from the beginning of the season, but that third down defense is starting to come along, and it's starting to play like the third down defense we saw earlier this season. If you are the Alabama Crimson Tide, though, the biggest key here, yes, you're going to have to solve the offensive front. Yes, you're going to have to be able to slow down whatever playmakers Garrett Nussmeier decides to throw to. You have to force some Tiger turnovers. I just realized that said force Tiger turnovers, and there is no and. The key is just as simple as that. You got to be able to force some turnovers here in this game because there's a very interesting trend when you take a look back at Alabama box scores. They have forced at least 3 turnovers in, I think, 4 of their previous 5 games. Now, obviously, they didn't win the game against Tennessee, but they gave themselves a shot to do it. The offense just wasn't there for Alabama that day. The one time that they didn't, the game that their offense was clicking, but their defense wasn't getting anything to help out the offense, it was the game against the Vanderbilt Commodores. The defense did nothing at all to help their case. They did not force 3 or more turnovers in that game. I think they had 1 forced turnover in that game, maybe 2, but regardless, Bama is more successful when they force turnovers. And this defense is very, very susceptible. It's been the weak point for Alabama really all season long, especially beyond that Vanderbilt game. And, I mean, you even saw a couple of other moments there where throughout the early season where Bama's defense was not that great. You also had Georgia's Carson Beck be able to light them up. Now, granted, it was late, but he was still able to get a lot of momentum going with that Georgia offense against this Bama defense. You got to be able to force some turnovers here because look at what happened when LSU had turnovers last game against Texas A&M. They were flustered. They could not stop the Texas A&M offense, and Bama's offense is, in my opinion, a lot better than what Texas A&M brings to the field. At least it's a whole lot more explosive. So if LSU turns the football over, yikes, it could be definitely a little bit of a rough day. But now, let me go ahead and give you my final thoughts. I will say, though, the final key on there, Death Valley at night matters. And it is going to matter a lot here in this contest. LSU is going to come out with all the fight, all the punches, and they're going to throw everything they have at Bama. Guys, I do not think it is going to be enough to beat this Alabama Crimson Tide team. I think the way that LSU struggled defending the run and especially defending the dual threat quarterback ability and the quarterback run of Marcel Reed really hurts LSU in this game when you go up against one of, if not the best dual threat quarterback in the country in Jalen Milroe. He's got dynamic weapons that can beat you, that he's going to be able to take advantage of. And this Alabama defense, I think, is on a roll. Forcing turnovers, LSU is going to get their points, they're going to get their yards, but I think Bama wins the turnover battle, and the playmaking ability of Jalen Milroe is just a little bit too much. I have the Tide coming out with a big-time win in Death Valley. Could just as easily see LSU win this one, and I realize I'm right on the line there, but that tells you how on the money I think that is. I do think Alabama wins this game by 3 points. I think it's very close, but I do have the Tide rolling away from Baton Rouge with a win. Thank you all so much for watching this video. It's good to be back. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I got the Tide winning this one, and we'll see you at Georgia Ole Miss in my next video. Goodbye.